And so, Rob, what are you doing out here amidst the peas?
I'm burying a piece of the soil quilt.
Well, what is that, and why here? Why are you curious about it?
I'm burying it here, and I'll show the piece of the. I have the piece of canvas fabric, sort of bound up with a piece of wire to make some sort of interesting pattern. Didn't think too much about it, but just to give it some visual interest when it's done. And I'm burying it in what is the oldest section of the garden. We already have one piece of the quilt buried in a forest environment under a bur oak tree, one that's buried in the orchard, which is a sort of transitional zone between forest and open land. And I was going to plant this one in the garden, so to speak, since this is the oldest area of the garden. The soil's very tilthy and very good texture. It's a sandy loam, and it's in about 20 or 30 yards of some big pine trees. So a lot of tree material in this earth. Very well-worked soil. It's been cultivated for 40 years roughly. So I just wanted to see if the pattern that emerges by the microbes in this soil is different to the ones that we see up on the other two pieces that we've buried.
So, I mean, you think about quilts, and I always think of, like, you know, the quilting bee and like women stitching. And so, what's special to you about a soil quilt, and you know, why bother?
Soil quilt's an interesting project. Most people famously take soil for granted. They treat it like dirt, as they say. We don't think much unless we do farm, and maybe even we don't then, about how much our lives depend on the soil, because we're basically built out of soil, and this soil is just simply all the living things that have gone before us. Easy to take for granted, to not pay attention to. It's a very lowly subject, one that's typically not regarded with any great importance except by soil scientists. And I feel like burying pieces of cloth, having soil microbes work on them, organisms which are essential to our lives on this planet, but again, which we take completely for granted. Having the soil microbes speak through the pattern that they leave on the fabric, and then taking those pieces of fabric and sewing them together in a sewing circle is a very good metaphor for the way in which I would say women's view of the world has not been often considered seriously. It's been considered trivial. It's been considered a matter of small quotidian things and nothing of the big picture. But I think considering that the quilting bees of old were spaces in which women could come together and speak frankly with one another, often disregarded by men as idle chit-chat, that the nature of the things that were being said were perhaps more important than we understood until later. And I feel like the soil beneath our feet may be also something which we take for granted far too long at our own peril, again, ignoring those things which are smallest, but which the care of which involve our being able to continue living on this planet.
That's beautiful. You are my man with heart. So where did this idea come from anyway?
Well, it came from you.
Oh, and I will say that it also came from those who have experimented with textile and painting with soil. In Kansas, Rhonda Janke comes to mind. She's been an inspiration, as have just sort of fabric textile weavers from around the world, particularly West Africa, when they paint with mud cloths. So I thought, yeah, just to bring this to the heart and soil and soul of the matter during the International Year of Soil. And, you know, of course, you're my husband, so you'll say yes. So what happens now?
Now we'll leave the soil-covered cloth in here. We'll leave the cloth buried for 3 weeks or so. And by the end of May, early June, we'll dig it up and see what's on it, and then we'll assemble the pieces of cloths and get a bunch of people together, and we'll sew the cloths together, and people will speak in that forum about what soil has meant to them, what they think of the soil, whether they're surprised by what they see, what they've learned about the soil, about how the microbes work, how they're essential to our lives, and just generally have a conversation about place and the importance of place and rootedness in the soil to both our physical lives, living as beings that consume the earth, and also our spiritual lives as people who are very rooted to the places that we come from.
All right, we'll let the soil speak, and we'll see what we have to say with each other. Thank you.